So further to the previous video, just explaining being further, I want to place it in the context of subjectivism. Does ontology displace subjectivism because ontology displaces metaphysics? I'm not satisfied that that's the case, because the natural metaphysics of the human, to use Heidegger's starting point, is something that he's prepared to work upon. So there is a metaphysics always already in the human subject. So I don't know that metaphysics is displaced in any sense in the usual form, but what is occurring is ontology in the history of philosophy displaces metaphysics, just as a rational form is displaced. So idealism, for example, as a rational form, is displaced somewhat by realism in the 20th century. So it's that kind of displacement. It's not making something disappear entirely. It's not as if we do things differently because of that displacement. It sort of just adds to our knowledge, the displacement of, say, idealism. So Hegel's concept of spirit is somewhat displaced once you dispense with that kind of metaphysics. So as I say, it's a history of these rational forms sort of pushing each other out, and it's the same with philosophers sort of pushing against what's already established and making a space for themselves. So we don't, in my view, we don't lose subjectivism, and with that we've got a continuing context. So if the context is in fact the history of philosophy, that's subjectivism as the overarching set of rational forms, if you like, that includes Descartes and dualism and includes idealism, that still stands, that it's the context for all these rational forms. Ontology coming in the 20th century is really a supplement and a new conception, and as I've said previously, probably the most important thing that Heidegger brings is the understanding of relationships, how we go about setting up relationships to understand them, how we understand them properly by understanding what it is that we bring together. And that's going to have to account for and include abstraction. So this sort of natural metaphysics that we do when we abstract, we are accounting for that because it's quite natural to do that, but we're also acknowledging this new concept of being, that we understand being without that abstraction, that we can get to being, or we can at least talk about and therefore rationalize about that being also. But rationalizing is not abstracting, not necessarily. They are different things. So I'm just, in terms of conceptual relations, can we match abstraction and rationalism, or rationalizing? Rationalizing is is what Descartes has done for us. So that's the metaphysician Descartes solving a particular problem about the foundation of knowledge. And there you have the maths-minded Descartes bringing in not an abstraction as such, but a method that really moves metaphysics along because it's going to be rational about it. Whereas presupposing God as a metaphysics, for example, or any kind of being, that's not a rationalizing. It may later on in the Enlightenment become a form of rationalizing, but Descartes really kicks off the modern movement because of the rationalism as a method, in short. So in terms of the primacy of relations, which it comes into shape because of Heidegger. Because of the primacy of relations has primacy, that means abstraction to some degree is displaced, even though, as I've noted, it's a natural thing. So you'd be satisfied that with the conception of being, you've dealt with the problem of solipsism, but not necessarily the overarching idea of subjectivism. So subject and object might even go, but does that remove subjectivism itself? It's kind of hard because we'd have to look closely at the hermeneutics of Heidegger to really establish how being as a new approach dispenses with the kind of standard subject-object language that we've got to use. Anyway, it does fit really with this context I'm working in, that declares a metaphysics either sustained because it didn't go down a universalist path, which in a certain sense you can say is a Platonic path, as opposed to those rational forms that did not lean on universalism. Or at least if they did lean on universalism, it was a secondary consequence of their activity or their method. So we'll get further along with those, but it's conceptual relations that we're going to have to look at. 20th century rational forms, really taking a huge leap with the introduction of ontology and those counterparts, hermeneutics and phenomenology, we'll have to touch on also. It's going to solve some of these problems that displacing abstraction or dispensing with metaphysics or making them secondary somehow because we've got a new concept, that the concept of being, that what that really would mean for the way that we're going to operate. So, for example, with language, and whether there's anything left of abstraction. Okay, thanks.